ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaste, my dear friends. Continuing the stay of Swami Vivekananda at 1000 Islands, I start my second video. Sometime the Swami took up the Bhakti Sutras of Narada. They are a short exposition of devotion to God, which gives one some conception of the lofty Hindu ideal of real, all-absorbing love for the Lord, love that literally possesses the devotee to the exclusion of every other thought. Bhakti is the Hindu method of realizing union with the divine, a method which naturally appeals to the devout. It is to love God and Him only. In these talks, the Swami for the first time spoke to us at length about his great master, Sri Ramakrishna, of his daily life with him and of his struggle with his own tendency to unbelief, which at times drew tears from his master. The other disciples have often said that Sri Ramakrishna always told them that Swami Vivekananda was a great soul who had come specially to help his work, and that as soon as he knew who he really was, he would at once give up the body. But he added that before that time arrived, there was a certain mission which the Swami would have to accomplish to help not only India but other lands as well. Frequently, Sri Ramakrishna said, "I have other disciples far away who speak a language I do not understand." After 7 weeks spent at Thousand Island Park, the Swami returned to New York City and later went abroad. He lectured and held classes in England until the end of November, when he returned to New York and resumed his teaching there. On this occasion, his students secured a competent stenographer and thus preserved the Swami's words. The reports of the class lectures were soon after published in book form, and these books, together with the pamphlets of the public lectures, remain today as enduring monuments of Swami Vivekananda's work in America. To those of us who were privileged to hear the lectures given, the Swami's very presence seems to live again and to speak to us from the printed pages. So exactly and accurately were his utterances transcribed by one who subsequently became one of the Swami's most devoted disciples. The work of both teacher and taught was purely a labor of love, so the blessing of the Lord rested upon it. The Master. February 14th, 1894 stands out in my memory as a day apart, a sacred holy day, for it was then that I first saw the form and listened to the voice of that great soul, that spiritual giant, the Swami Vivekananda, who 2 years later, to my great joy and never ceasing wonder, accepted me as a disciple. He had been lecturing in the large cities of this country, and on the above date gave the first of a series of lectures in Detroit in the Unitarian Church. The large edifice was literally packed, and the Swami received an ovation. I can see him yet as he stepped upon the platform, a regal, majestic figure, vital, forceful, dominant, and at the first sound of the wonderful voice, a voice all music, now like the plaintive minor strain of an Eoline harp. Again, deep, vibrant, resonant, there was a hush, a stillness that could almost be felt, and the vast audience breathed as one man. The Swami gave 5 public lectures and he held his audiences, for his was the grasp of the master hand and he spoke as one with authority. His arguments were logical, convincing, and in his most brilliant oratorical flights, never once did he lose sight of the main issue, the truth he wished to drive home. He fearlessly attacked principles, but in personal matters one felt that here was a man whose great heart could take in all of humanity, seeing beyond their faults and foibles, one who would suffer and forgive to the uttermost. In fact, when it was given to me to know him more intimately, I found that he did forgive to the uttermost. With what infinite love and patience would he lead those who came to him out of the labyrinth of their own frailties and point out to them the way out of self to God. He knew no malice. Did one abuse him, he would look thoughtful, repeat Shiva Shiva, then his face would become illumined and he would say gently, "It is only the voice of the beloved." Or if we who loved him would become indignant, he would ask, "What difference can it make when one knows that blamer blamed and praiser praised are one?" Again, under like circumstances, he would tell us some story of how Sri Ramakrishna would never recognize personal abuse or malice. Everything good or bad, the dual throng was from the beloved mother. It was given to me to know him in an intimate way for a period of several years, and never once did I find a flaw in his character. He was incapable of petty weakness, and had Vivekananda possessed faults, they would have been generous ones. With all his greatness, he was as simple as a child, equally at home among the rich and the great, or among the poor and the lowly. While in Detroit, he was the guest of Mrs. John J. Bagley, the widow of the ex-governor of Michigan and a lady of rare culture and unusual spirituality. She told me that never once during the time he was a guest in her house, about 4 weeks, did he fail to express the highest in word and action that his presence was a continual benediction. After leaving Mrs. Bagley, Vivekananda spent 2 weeks as the guest of honored Thomas W. Palmer. Mrs. Palmer was president of the World's Fair Commission. He had been formerly U.S. Minister to Spain and also a U.S. Senator. This gentleman is still living and is over 80 years of age. For myself, I can say that never in all the years I knew Vivekananda did he fail to manifest the highest in life and purpose. Blessed and beloved Swamiji, I never thought it possible for man to be so white, so chaste as he was. It set him apart from other men. He was brought in contact with our most brilliant and beautiful women. Mere beauty did not attract him, but he would often say, "I like to cross swords with your bright intellectual woman." It is a new experience for me, for in my country the women are more or less secluded. His manner was that of boyish frankness and naivety and very winsome. I remember one evening after he had delivered a profoundly impressive lesson, scaling the very height of realization, he was found standing at the foot of the stairs with a puzzled, almost disconsolate expression on his face. People were going up and down stairs, putting on their wraps, etc. Suddenly his face lighted up and he said, "I have it. Going up the stairs, the gentleman precedes the lady. Coming down, the lady precedes the gentleman. Is not it true to his Eastern training, he felt that a breach of etiquette was a breach of hospitality. In speaking to me one day regarding those who wish to have a part in his life work, he said they must be pure in heart. There was one disciple of whom he hoped much. He evidently saw in her great possibilities for renunciation and self-sacrifice. He found me alone one day and asked me many questions regarding her life and environment, and after I had answered them all, he looked at me so wistfully and said, "And she is pure, pure in soul, is it not?" I simply answered, "Yes, Swami, she is absolutely pure in heart." His face lighted up and his eyes shone with divine fire. I knew it, I felt it. I must have her for my work in Calcutta, he said with enthusiasm. He then told me of his plans and hopes for the advancement of the women of India. Education is what they need, he would say. We must have a school in Calcutta. A school for girls has since been established there by the sister Nivedita, and the above mentioned disciples share the work with her, living in a Calcutta lane and wearing the sari, doing the mother's work as best she may. She shared all these experiences with me, for me together sought out the master and asked him to teach us. He was the man of the hour in Detroit that winter. Society smiled upon him and he was much sought after. The daily papers recorded his comings and his goings. Even his food was discussed. One paper gravely stating that his breakfast consisting of bread and butter thickly sprinkled with pepper. Letters and invitations came pouring in, and Detroit was at the feet of Vivekananda. He always loved Detroit and was grateful for all the kindness and courtesy shown him. He had no chance to meet him in a personal way at the time, but we listened and pondered in our hearts over all that we heard him say, resolving to find him sometime somewhere, even if we had to go across the world to do it. We lost trace of him completely for nearly 2 years and thought that probably he had returned to India, but one afternoon we were told by a friend that he was still in this country and that he was spending the summer at Thousand Island Park. We started the next morning, resolved to seek him out and ask him to teach us. At last, after a weary search, we found him. We were feeling very much frightened at our temerity in thus intruding upon his privacy, but he had lighted a fire in our souls that could not be quenched. We must know more of this wonderful man and his teaching. It was a dark and rainy night and we were weary after our long journey, but we could not rest until we had seen him face to face. Would he accept us? And if he did not, what then could we do? It suddenly seemed to us that it might be a foolish thing to go several hundred miles to find a man who did not even know of our existence, but we plodded on up the hill in the rain and darkness with a man we had hired to show us the way with his lantern. Speaking of this in after years, our guru would refer to us as my disciples who traveled hundreds of miles to find me, and they came in the night and in the rain. We had thought of what say to him, but when we realized that we had really found him, we instantly forgot all our fine speeches, and one of us blurted out, "We came from Detroit and Mrs. P sent us to you." The other said, "We have come to you just as we would go to Jesus if he were still on the earth and ask him to teach us." He looked at us so kindly and said gently, "If only I possessed the power of the Christ to set you free now." He stood for a moment looking thoughtful, and then turning to his hostess who was standing near said, "These ladies are from Detroit. Please show them upstairs and allow them to spend the evening with us." We remained until late, listening to the master, who paid no more attention to us. But as we bade them all good night, we were told to come the next morning at 9 o'clock. We arrived promptly, and to our great joy were accepted by the master and were cordially invited to become member of the household. Of our stay there, another disciple has written fully, and I will only say that it was a most blessed summer. I have never seen our master quite as he was then. He was at his best among those who loved him. There were 12 of us, and it seemed as if Pentecostal fire descended and touched the master. One afternoon, when he had been telling us of the glory of renunciation, of the joy and freedom of those of the authority robe, he suddenly left us, and in a short time he had written his song of the Sannyasin, a very passion of sacrifice and renunciation. I think the thing which impressed me most in those days was his infinite patience and gentleness, like a father with his children, though most of us were several years older than he. After a morning in the classroom where it almost seemed as if he had gazed into the very face of the infinite, he would leave the room, returning soon to say, "Now I am going to cook for you." And with what patience would he stand over the stove and prepare some Indian tidbit for us. The last time he was with us in Detroit, he prepared for us the most delicious curries. What a lesson to his disciples, the brilliant, the great, and learned Vivekananda, ministering to their little wants. He was at those times gentle, so benign. What a legacy of sacred, tender memories has he left us. One day Vivekananda related to us the story that he had most impressed itself upon his life. It was told him over and over again in his boyhood by his nurse, and he never wearied of hearing it repeated. I will give it as nearly possible in his own words. The widow of a Brahmin was left very, very poor with one child, a little boy who was almost a baby. Because he was the son of a Brahmin, the boy had to be educated, but how to do it? In the village where the poor widow lived, there was no teacher, so the boy had to go to the neighboring village to be taught. And because his mother was very, very poor, he had to walk there. There was a small forest between the two villages, and through this the boy had to pass. In India, as in all hot countries, teaching is given very early in the morning and again towards evening. Through the heat of the day, no work is done, so it was always dark when the little boy went to school and also when he came home. In my country, instruction in religion is free to those who cannot pay, so the little boy could go to this teacher without charge, but he had to walk through the forest, and he was all alone, and he was terribly afraid. He went to his mother and said, "I have always to go alone through that terrible forest, and I am afraid. Other boys have servants to go with them and take care of them. Why cannot I have a servant to go with me?" But his mother said, "Alas, my child, I am too poor. I cannot send a servant with you." "What can I do then?" asked the little boy. "I will tell you," said his mother. "Do this. In the forest is your shepherd brother Krishna. Krishna is known in India as the shepherd god. Call on him and he will come and take care of you, and you will not be alone." So the next day the little boy went into the forest and called, "Brother shepherd, are you there?" And he heard a voice say, "Yes, I am here." And the little boy was comforted and was no more afraid. By and by he used to meet coming out of the forest a boy of his own age, who played with him and walked with him, and the little boy was happy. After a while the father of the teacher died, and there was a great ceremonial festival, as is common in India on such occasions. When all the scholars made present to their teacher, and the poor little boy went to his mother and asked her to buy him a present to give like the rest. But his mother told him she was too poor. Then he wept and said, "What shall I do?" And his mother said, "Go to Brother Shepherd and ask him." So he went into the forest and called Brother Shepherd. "Brother Shepherd, can you give me a present to give to my teacher?" And there appeared before him a little pitcher of milk. The boy took the pitcher gratefully and went to the house of his teacher and stood in a corner waiting for the servants to take his gift to the teacher. But the other presents were so much grander and finer that the servants paid no attention to him. So he spoke and said, "Teacher, here is the present I have brought you." Still no one took any notice. Then the little boy spoke up again from his corner and said, "Teacher, here is the present I have brought you." And the teacher, looking over and seeing the pitiful little gift, scorned at it, but said to the servant, "Since he makes so much fuss about it, take the pitcher and pour the milk into one of the glasses and let him go." So the servant took the pitcher and poured the milk into a cup, but just as soon as he poured out the milk, the pitcher filled right up again, and it could not be emptied. Then everybody was surprised and asked, "What is this? Where did you get this pitcher?" And the little boy said, "Brother Shepherd gave it to me in the forest." "What?" they all exclaimed. "You have seen Krishna and he gave you this?" "Yes," said the little boy, "and he plays with me every day and walks with me when I come to school." "What?" they all exclaimed. "You walk with Krishna? You play with Krishna?" And the teacher said, "Can you take us and show us this?" And the little boy said, "Yes, I can, come with me." Then the little boy and the teacher went into the forest, and the little boy began to call as usual, "Brother Shepherd, here is my teacher come to you, where are you?" But no answer came. The little boy called again and again, and no answer came. Then he wept and said, "Brother Shepherd, do come, or else they will call me a liar." Then from afar off a voice was heard saying, "I come to you because you are pure and your time has come. But your teacher has many rounds to go through before he can see me." After the summer at Thousand Island Park, Vivekananda sailed for England, and I did not see him until the following spring, 1896, when he came to Detroit for 2 weeks. He was accompanied by his stenographer, the faithful Goodwin. They occupied a suite of rooms at the Richelieu, a small family hotel, and had the use of the large drawing room for classwork and lectures. The room was not large enough to accommodate the crowds, and to our great regret many were turned away. The room, as also the hall, staircase and library, were literally packed. At the time he was all bhakti. The love for God was a hunger and a thirst. A kind of divine madness seemed to take possession of him, as if his heart would burst with longing for the beloved mother. His last public appearance in Detroit was at the temple Bethel of which the Rabbi Louis Grossman, an ardent admirer of the Swami, was the pastor. It was Sunday evening, and so great was the crowd that we almost feared a panic. There was a solid line reaching far out into the street, and hundreds were turned away. Vivekananda held the large audience spellbound, his subject being India's message to the West and the ideal of a universal religion. He gave us a most brilliant and masterly discourse. Never had I seen Master look as he looked that night. There was something in his beauty not of earth. It was as if the spirit had almost burst the bonds of flesh, and it was then that I first saw a foreshadowing of the end. He was much exhausted from years of overwork, and it was even then to be seen that he was not long for this world. I tried to close my eyes to it, but in my heart I knew the truth. He had needed rest but felt that he must go on. The next time I saw him was in July 1899. He had been extremely ill and it was thought that a long sea voyage would benefit him. So he sailed for England from Calcutta on the steamship Golconda. Much to his surprise, two of his American disciples were at the Tilbury docks in London when the ship arrived. We had seen in an Indian magazine a notice that he would sail on a certain date, and we hastened over to the other side to meet him, as we were very much alarmed at the reports we had heard regarding his health. He had grown very slim and looked and acted like a boy. He was so happy to find the voyage had brought back some of the old strength and vigor. The sister Nivedita and the Swami Turiyananda accompanied him to England, and quarters were found for the two Swamis in a roomy old-fashioned house at Wimbledon, not far from London. It was very quiet and restful, and we all spent a happy month there. Swami did no public work in England at that time and soon sailed for America accompanied by the Swami Turiyananda and his American friend. There were 10 never to be forgotten days spent on the ocean. Reading and exposition of the Gita occupied every morning, also reciting and translating poems and stories from the Sanskrit and chanting old Vedic hymns. The sea was smooth, and at night the moonlight was entrancing. Those were wonderful evenings. The master paced up and down the deck, a majestic figure in the moonlight, stopping now and then to speak to us of the beauties of nature. And if all this Maya is so beautiful, think of the wondrous beauty of the reality behind it, he would exclaim. One especially fine evening, when the moon was at the full and softly mellow and golden, a night of mystery and enchantment, he stood silently for a long time, drinking in the beauty of the scene. Suddenly he turned to us and said, "Why recite poetry when there, pointing to sea and sky, is the very essence of poetry?" We reached New York all too soon, feeling that we never could be grateful enough for those blessed, intimate 10 days with our Guru. The next time I saw him was on July 4th, 1900, when he came to Detroit for a short visit among his friends. He had grown so thin, almost ethereal. Not long would that great spirit be imprisoned in clay. Once more we closed our eyes to the sad truth, hoping against hope. I never saw him again, but that other disciple was privileged to be with him in India for a few weeks before he left us forever. Of that time, I cannot bear to think. The sorrow and the heartbreak of it all still abides with me. But deep down underneath all the pain and grief is a great calm, a sweet and blessed consciousness that great souls do come to earth to point out to man the way, the truth, and the life. And when I realized that it was given to me to come under the influence of such an one, finding each day a new beauty, a deeper significance in his teachings, I can almost believe as I meditate upon all this that I hear a voice saying, "Take off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place wherein thou standest is holy ground." So this was written by Swami Vivekananda's disciple of Detroit. At the morning talks, it was possible to take a few notes, and those that follow were made on these occasions. They are naturally somewhat disconnected, as the Swami encouraged us to ask questions and to seek the fullest explanation of any problem that presented itself. Thus, these are not at all like notes of regular lectures, but simply brief records of familiar discourses, being taken in longhand and solely for individual use. Much that was said failed to be written down. Such as they are, with all their incompleteness, they possess a value of their own, and an added value to those who knew and loved the Swami as being his utterances. While necessarily the teaching itself cannot vary much, the presentation is new and different from anything that we now have in print of the words of our much loved teacher. In loving remembrance of a great and good man and of the many happy hours spent with him, these fragments of his teachings are now offered to the public. May the Lord, whom he so devoutly worshipped and untiringly proclaimed to us, bless his inspired words and fill our hearts with that divine love which the Swami so constantly urged us to manifest. So my dear friends, these two videos I have just to introduce the friends about how he spent his time in Thousand Islands and taught the 12 of his disciples. So thank you. Now I end the second video. Now on third video onward I will start the actual book that is called Inspired Talks. I will start the first video Wednesday, June 19th, 1895. Okay, dear friend, thank you for watching and listening the video with your patience. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thank you so much, my dear friend. Namaste, namaste, namaste.